Adaptation is pretty broken, and Mahoraga adapts to everything, but at the same time, not really. Mahoraga is the strongest 10 Shadow Shikigami, coming in at about 13 feet tall and 400 pounds of lean muscle. We have Jujutsu Kaisen's true monster, one truly giant, vicious, steroid-fueled monster. But stomping around on everyone like he's Draymond Green isn't the only way to combat his opponents, and what really makes this menace special is something called Adaptation. You see that giant wheel on his head? Well, it's not exactly the latest Yeezy. He's not wearing it just for the fashion. It's actually the key to one of the most powerful abilities in the entire series, capable of creating techniques that not even Sukuna could discover in his entire lifetime. You might say standing around and just waiting is aura farming, but for Mahoraga, there's never time where he's actually doing nothing. You have all seen it before, but here's the really bad news. Adaptation has definitely lost fights. Stated to adapt to any and all phenomenon, but was just cooked in a literal furnace. Even with shooting up all that trend, it can't save him from what's basically just Gojo's big purple glorified ki blast. That also makes me wonder, can Mahoraga actually adapt to anything? What about the Death Note, Minato's Reaper Death Seal, Infinity Stone LeBron? Firstly, we need to understand adaptation, get a more technical perspective. This ability doesn't actually have an official name in the manga, and it's just something that Mahoraga does, but probably some type of curse technique. Sukuna used this curse technique shrine and its slashes to try to dice up Mahoraga, but these slashes are also completely invisible and hidden to the naked eye until Mahoraga's wheel begins to click. Adaptation broke down the technique and instantly the slashes became visible to the Shikigami. Nobody outside of probably Satoru Gojo at this point could ever see Sukuna's slashes. Mahoraga found out some way somehow to block one of these slashes by identifying whenever they were coming in his direction, and he ends up blocking one of them with the sword attached to his arm. We call him Lethal Shooter because Mahoraga only needs one failed attempt and experience to begin cracking down another strategy for overcoming the problem, each click representing the progress happening and loading up for the next adaptation. Some of the more complicated techniques need multiple clicks and others just need only one, but you could literally think of it as a bar loading progress. Sometimes the loading stage can happen pretty quickly, but other times it's more like GTA 5 on the PS3. Adapting against something like Gojo's Limitless Curse technique would take longer because even with Sukuna being thrown around with blue constantly, which should make the adaptation faster since it's giving Mahoraga more data to research and analyze, it's still going to be extremely slow because the technique itself is complicated. The Limitless being this super complicated nerd thing with Achilles and the tortoise and an infinite division of space happening are all just too insane for GPT Mahoraga to analyze over here. Basically, the more complicated the problem, the more time and data you're gonna need to figure it out. That's just how Mahoraga's adaptation works. Adaptation is the ability to adapt to any and all phenomenon, like late throws in a rock paper scissors game. After hearing that yap session, you should understand it now. There's not really much else we need to cover. Except, like I've already said, that ability to be able to adapt against anything is technically true. Adaptation, according to Google, is becoming adjusted to new conditions. That means that the most simple solution to get around adaptation is the most caveman idea. Must beat big monster with big blast. Mahoraga can technically, yes, adapt to anything, he just needs the time to adapt. There's a really simple method to this, and we've already seen it within the series. Sukuna and Gojo both exercise Mahoraga, and each of them used their trump card, which was a big f***ing blast, to completely fry Mahoraga. But these aren't the only type of attacks that can finish off the Shikigami, and this method and strategy for Gojo and Sukuna works because they don't give him a chance to adapt. There's many other methods in order to complete this job besides using just a big ki blast, and one of them, for example, would be soul manipulation. When we say soul manipulation, you probably think of Mahito's idol transfiguration, but that technique probably won't work in taking down Mahoraga because he didn't even take down Nobara, so it's definitely not taking down this monster. Firstly, before getting into specifics, Mahoraga definitely has his own soul. Even inanimate objects have some type of soul, and that's why Maki's split soul katana works on regular obstacles. There's no way rocks have souls and Mahoraga doesn't have a soul. My favorite method, which is actually also a sealing technique and is mostly soul manipulation, is Minato's Reaper Death Seal from Naruto. Nobody can see the Reaper except the caster, which makes this even more problematic for Mahoraga. By trading the caster's life and sacrificing yourself to the demon, you can suck the soul out of your opponent. Okay, wait, that actually sounds kind of crazy. You can make his soul leave his body. Wait, that might be worse. Not everyone can use this technique as effectively, and sometimes there's cases like Hiruzen and Orochimaru literally playing tug of war with their own souls just because Hiruzen sucks at using this technique and he's old. On the other hand, someone like Minato who can literally snipe the Nine Tails with the Reaper Death Seal and is definitely stronger is cooking Mahoraga. Other sealing techniques like the Mufuba from Dragon Ball can definitely pack up this monster. Even if it's just in a tiny rice cooker, it's enough as long as the seal is placed. Something like Planetary Devastation from Naruto could work, but that depends on Mahoraga adapting while inside the Renegon-built rock. The idea is using techniques that don't give him the free range to adapt and instantly neutralize him. Maybe Mahoraga even finds a way to adapt while being sealed away, and he creates some type of adaptation to bring himself back to the overworld like he's Super Buu trapped in the time chamber. We need something that can definitely take down Mahoraga, something that can definitely take his life, and that sounds like the perfect job for the Death Note. Using the Death Note is very simple. Scribble in that annoying upstairs neighbor's name, or better yet 6 from Tokyo, just wait a couple minutes and then watch your target flatline. It's really simple and just about anybody could use the Death Note. However, the Death Note probably won't work on Mahoraga because there's 2 rules in the book that limit the power enough to say that it probably wouldn't work on this monster. The book explicitly mentions that only humans can be cooked by the Death Note, and Mahoraga obviously isn't human, so this strategy probably wouldn't work either. If we're looking for something that could completely destroy Mahoraga, then the obvious answer is some type of ability with existence erasing properties. Hakai from Dragon Ball is the first example. Beerus is the god of destruction, and by using Hakai, he can erase his target, and it's one of the deadliest abilities in Dragon Ball. But the problem is that sometimes when we see Hakai, it could be a little bit inconsistent and might make a couple of problems with using this ability to take down Mahoraga. Goku tried to turn Zamasu into sand using the Hakai, but his immortality countered this technique and completely regenerated half of his body. Goku at this point and the rest of Dragon Ball is probably about thousands of times faster than Mahoraga, but if we're just comparing technique against technique, Adaptation can possibly stop Hakai midway, just like what happened with Zamasu. Mahoraga's regenerated from attacks before like Malevolent Shrine, and obviously I'm not saying that Malevolent Shrine is the same or anything like Hakai, but the idea that Mahoraga could regenerate while the attack is destroying his body isn't far-fetched. Would this actually happen? Absolutely not, because even DBZ Yamcha would completely fry Mahoraga. But again, it's possible just comparing technique against technique, and if the caster is only as proficient as Goku and not someone like Beerus, because this would never happen if Beerus was using Hakai on Zamasu. What's honestly one of the coolest ways to counter adaptation is D4C from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Mahoraga has 0 chance at adapting to this stand's abilities once he's dragged into another neighboring universe. D4C will force Mahoraga into making contact with himself, which will inevitably end his own life. Nobody besides Valentine can exist with 2 different versions of himself in the same world. It's similar to how the world corrects itself when Gojo deletes space and creates the blue type of attraction. D4C will create 2 Mahoragas that will cause the world to fix itself by eradicating both of them. You can't really explain how unlimited purple shredded Mahoraga without getting this video totally off track and complicated, but Sukuna's flame arrow is actually pretty well explained in the manga. Using Malevolent Shrine together with the flame arrow creates this thermobaric explosion, which is what finished off Mahoraga in Shibuya. That means that Mahoraga's regeneration isn't something like Perfect Cell or Majin Buu where every single atom needs to be disintegrated down to the very cell. Thermobaric explosions like Sukuna's homemade Walter White Oppenheimer-styled bomb don't nuke matter on the atomic level, but they still end up eviscerating Mahoraga and it gets the job done. That also means that attacks that scale above Mahoraga's defense and have the area of effect large enough to completely destroy him will take down this monster. These attacks don't necessarily need to be atomizing, but it definitely helps. Trunks' blast that destroyed Mecha Frieza completely fried him down to his very atoms according to the Daizenshu. You could argue all Ki Blast as strong as future Trunk's have atomizing properties because this Ki Blast was really nothing special. Naruto's Wind-style Rasen Shuriken shapes the Wind Chakra into an armada of tiny swords, then systematically attacking every cell in the target's body. After Kakuzu got slammed by Naruto with the Rasen Shuriken, he was instantly fried. Kakashi said that the number of the attacks is almost infinite. even his Sharingan couldn't follow the attacks at all. In other words, even basic key attacks in the Rasen Shuriken break down opponents far enough to completely shred through Mahoraga. These attacks destroy opponents far more effectively than something like Sukuna's Flame Arrow in Shibuya. The debate over Genjutsu working in other verses like Jujutsu Kaisen has been happening for years. There's other in-depth videos talking about it if you're interested, but I'm not going to be fully nerding out about that today. Let's just say hypothetically that verse equalization allowed chakra to flow within sorcerers, cursed spirits, and Shikigami despite them not having their own chakra network. Visual Genjutsu just wouldn't work on Mahoraga, and the answer is very simple. Mahoraga literally has no fucking eyes. Genjutsu like Jiraiya's frog song would probably work and subdue him, but eventually, just like the other victims, he'll probably end up adapting his way out of Genjutsu. You kinda run into the same wall using Genjutsu as a win con like the Sealing Jutsu because these abilities won't eradicate Mahoraga. They're good methods for setting up other attacks to come into place, but these abilities alone won't eradicate Mahoraga. Using something maybe more magical like the Dragon Balls, that could also work. Obviously, you need to find all 7, but you could definitely do that. You got it, bro. Collecting all the Dragon Balls together, you get 3 wishes. Shenron, which is the name of the green magic dragon, normally can't grant wishes above his own power. Using the first 2 wishes together to defeat Mahoraga would be the safest method for this plan to work. The first wish should be wishing away his adaptation ability. Similar to how Krillin wished away the bomb with an Android 18, you could do the same thing to Mahoraga's adaptation. Once adaptation is gone, Shenron can definitely exercise the Shikigami with no questions asked.